Listen, at Knifewear, we spend days and days and days talking about knives. One of the big differentiating terms we use is handmade and factory made. We want to talk a bit about that because it's such a vague term. What makes something handmade and what makes something factory made? And frankly, what we try and do is get the best of the knives that's available.
Even most handmade knives that we carry are made in the setup like a factory. Right, Masai-san has his setup with 2 workers, and it has the spring hammer, it's got the sharpening station, it's got a buffing wheels, it's got the sanding belt. That's a proper factory setup.
Yeah, and they're all using very similar machines. I think one of the things that you see in the more handmade places is the person who's determining how much steel to take off or how hard the hammer's going to hit or how hot the steel is. That's a decision made by a human, right? And that can be done well as much as it can be done poorly, right? I've made a knife before and I can tell you it's not very good. So what goes into making a factory-made knife? That's what we're going to talk about today. Since the dawn of knives, people have been making knives. Humans have been making knives for a long time, and when they started making knives thousands of years ago, they weren't using factory machines. They were using rudimentary stone tools to create something.
Oh, that's a knife.
This is a knife made with rudimentary stone tools. It was used for whatever you probably use a knife for now. Well, maybe something a little different. Since then, over time, processes have changed. And of course, humans love efficiency. But we like to make things easier so we can make more money and so we can go back to living our lives without having to work all of the time. We're so fortunate that we get to know a whole bunch of blacksmiths who retain the traditions of their families, who make stuff with very few scientific tools and education. They do it the way they were shown, and they produce beautiful, brilliant tools that have a really romantic attraction to them. But over the years, we're finding more and more factory processing, whether it's the steel manufacturing, the steel cladding, the tempering, the heat treating, or just the general production of the knives in these wider factory settings to be producing really excellent stuff. One of the reasons you might like buying Japanese kitchen knives is because of the rich history of thousands of years of knife making that's happened on this island. What we're starting to see is a leveling of that playing field. We're starting to see the factory side of things where people are producing stuff in a more efficient fashion starting to rise up to become a really great quality product.
One of the things why the Japanese factory-made knives have such a bad rap is because they were producing not that great of knives before. They weren't.
Well, there was a time of really low quality, fast, cheap production, right?
Absolutely, right? When you go back in the history of 1940s and 50s, everything come out from Japan was terrible.
Interesting. I wonder how that happened.
Since the 50s, everything's got improved. Many factories have realized that producing and selling those poor quality products are not a thing anymore. They have to up the level of the quality as well as the production. So many knife factories as well as kitchen knife steel manufacturers have been developing their techniques, skills, and knowledge into creating a fantastic, so we call it factory-made knives.
Well, I think one of the key things you mentioned there was the kitchen knife steel factories. Along with the people that are making the knives, there are other people in other places who are specializing in making the steel. Now they're making the steel core, they're also making the cladding steel, and often they're putting the two together. And a lot of times these factories, even the blacksmiths, are finding that having this factory who specializes in making that main core piece of the knife is really important and really beneficial to the whole process.
And they have been doing this for quite some time, right? So they have actually accumulated the knowledge about steel, heat treatment, and how the inner structure of steel will affect the quality of end product. Even when we speak to one of our favorite blacksmiths, Masashi Yamamoto-san, he once told me that those steel manufacturers, as well as the cladding companies, they must have figured themselves out creating as good of quality of steel or the products for a kitchen knives.
So it's like what we're seeing now is all of the people producing knives are receiving the same raw ingredients. They're starting from the same ground, and it's a level playing field here. And we're starting to see different ways of producing things in both factories and in the handmade sphere, and it's really kind of cool to watch.
So steel company, they take this iron ore and melt them in a big pot and put all other elements to make sure the balance of the steel is what they want. So they're all melted into one pot, mix it in, and pour. That's what the steel companies are doing.
Gotcha.
And they make a big bar.
They just make a big piece of dough.
Yeah.
It's like they mix the ingredients together, they melt it all together. Ta-da! They've got their factory-specific, quality-driven steel. Okay, so that steel then goes to the cladding company.
Yes.
So what goes on to the cladding company, and what leaves the cladding company?
So cladding company, sometimes it's the same, but there is this cladding company as well. Most Japanese knives are made with 3 layers of steel. It's got a core steel and clad with a softer steel on the outside. And they can choose the combination of which steel to use, which steel to clad with and everything, but that's what the cladding company is doing. Some blacksmiths does cladding in-house, like Manaka-san, right? But now these days, most blacksmiths in Japan, and so as the factory-made knife manufacturer, they buy cladded steel, right? And the reason why is that it is very difficult, especially for some steels, to clad together. Stainless steel. You know why they're called stainless steel? Because they don't rust.
That's right.
The reason why they don't rust is they have very fine film protecting the steel.
Sure.
And that film becomes an obstacle when it comes to sticking together.
So it's hard to make stainless steel stick to stainless steel. Or it's hard to make stainless steel stick to carbon steel.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got guys that are working in cladding companies who are just doing this very important process of sticking steel to steel.
Absolutely. They have machinery and they have equipment. So what is actually preventing is this oxidized film.
Gotcha.
So what's bad? Oxygen.
Right.
So they have this vacuum chamber to get rid of all the oxygen.
That's so cool.
To invest in that kind of facility in a single blacksmith shop, it's not really happening.
It's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, a lot of
Exactly.
effort. You're now lumping around really heavy things of steel. You got to have bigger machines to pick it up. You're probably buying steel in much larger quantities. So therefore, it's all of a sudden a whole bunch of more money tied up. And you're not a steel clad guy. You're just a blacksmith. Yeah, I see.
That's why blacksmith and many factory-made manufacturers buy the pre-clad steel from those companies.
Okay, let's wind this back. Why do we have clad steel? Why do we have a blade that's formed with 3 different layers of metal?
Say when you have a glass and see if I drop this on the floor, what happens?
It breaks.
Yes. But what if I have those foamy things around them? Then I drop, what happens?
Then it probably doesn't break.
Right? So,
Probably.
Probably. That's
Right.
the same thing. That's probably is very good because the Japanese knives, the steel is much, much harder. So when it hits really hard object, it can break or
Sure.
it can break
It's
in
more
half.
brittle.
Yes.
But it's also sharper, so we like it.
Exactly. That's
All
why
right.
they have the softer material on the outside to protect it from, say, breaking in half or shattering.
Nice. Okay, so a blacksmith gets the same kind of steel that a factory would get. It takes it to a forge, heats it up, hammers it out into the shape, grinds it down, turns it into a knife. If a factory is getting the same piece of steel, what are they doing that's different than the blacksmith?
Basically, what the factory gets is a pre-thin blade.
Okay.
They've already been rolled and thinned out blade.
Okay.
So that's what the most blacksmiths are doing. They get the chunk of steel that's about the half-inch thick and put it in the forge, hammers it out, and as he shapes into the knife shape, he also thins the blade out. Factories, they often get pre-thinned blade. Then they cut into the shape by using a punch machine or the razor to shape out this knife.
Yeah.
Then do the very similar process. Heat treat them, grind them, sharpen them, put in handles on, and everything.
Interesting. So it sounds like after the blade is shaped, I mean, there's still a whole bunch more work that goes on, whether it's at a blacksmith place or at a factory. Like, what's going to happen after you've got the knife shape that goes on in a factory?
So the traditionally Japanese blacksmith would heat treat the knife, right?
Okay, yep.
Traditionally, they close the oak curtains.
Right.
They put the knife in the forge,
Right.
check the color,
Right.
and at the right timing, they put that in the water to quench them.
Sure, yeah.
So in a factory made setting, they do have this very similar to the conveyor belt setting. They go through this furnace, kiln, or whatever you want to call it, heat up the steel and coolers it down in very controlled environment. Thing about the traditional blacksmithing heat treatment is very dependent on the craftsman. They have to know the color.
Right.
They have to be able to tell when to take it out and how long it's to cool and everything, right? You can't leave those in the water.
Sure.
You can't cool it down to actually the one point. It will change so you have to know old stuff, right?
Right.
You have to see the color by eyes and everything, and training them is going to be really hard.
So it goes through a really complex heat treating process, and when we do it at a factory, it's going through something that's controlled very rigidly.
Exactly.
So sometimes we might even see that the heat treating process is done better in this stage.
For example, one of the blacksmiths that we deal with, Takeda-san, he sends his knife to the heat treatment factory for annealing because it gets so much more precise annealing, so much more precise temperature control at the heat treatment factory.
So he's found someone to do the part of the work that's better than he is at doing it.
Absolutely.
That sounds smart to me.
So factory-made knives, those heat treatment, annealing, quenching, and temperings are done in such controlled environment, thus keeping the quality the same.
Yeah, right. So once we've got the heat treating done, they got to shape the blade, sharpen it, put handles on it, polish it, make any of the rough edges smooth, make sure the knife is really sharp, test it, clean it, put it in a box. Like, who's doing that? Is that all just done with robots and machines?
So there's no such thing as a robot in none of the Japanese factories that we work with.
Yeah.
There is no robot arm scrubbing the blade, transferring to one place to another. It's just actually, crates of knives and goes to one place to another like this.
Right.
And they do, of course, use the machines, right? They have the grinding machine, but they don't only use one machine to do all work. They put the one blade one by one, making sure the blade that's been sharpened or ground comes out from the machines are nice and consistent. There's no flaws. If it's bent, they'll fix the bend before they put it in the machine, everything. So there's the operator who is specialized in each steps.
Right, so just like having that person that's really good at annealing the steel and using the machines and technology they've got inside the factory, each one of these steps is being taken care of by someone who is trained and specialized to use quality machines to deliver a good quality product knife. And during that process, they're also checking it as they go.
Absolutely.
Right.
And some of the sharpening processes are done by hand as well.
Sure, yeah.
For example, if we go to some of the machine-made factories, they do have those big wheel sharpening stones, like we see them at any other blacksmith shop. They put the blade in and they thin the blade out by using hand and their knowledge and their skills. Then put it back in the machine to evens it out. It's a great step to ensures that the knife cuts like hand forged, handmade, our definition of handmade knives.
Yeah, that's cool. What it sounds like to me, and I've bought tons of handmade knives, and I've bought lots of factory-made knives too. But it sounds like to me, when you've got a handmade product, you've got a lot of romance, you've got a lot of skill, they look beautiful, they change over time. But when you're getting something that's more of that factory-made style, you're getting a lot of consistency, a lot of dependability, and really you get a lot of quality for what you're paying for, right?
Absolutely, right. So yeah, absolutely. Like if you look at Tojiro knives or many of our Haruyuki knives, that's definitely true. But at the same time though, there are a lot of good, fantastic knife makers, like say Kobayashi knives.
Right, Araseki.
Yeah, Araseki. He's a knife sharpener. He finishes, say on the bevel, with so-called machine, like grinding machine, right? He is son of the automated grinding machine company.
His dad's an automated grinding machine?
His dad company grinds very inexpensive knives for long time. But now he took it to the next level.
Right.
So even though his knives are, say, machine forged, and a lot of processes are done like other machine-made knives, but he took it to the next level. There are a lot of really good things coming out from this machine-made knives. Even some or many are better than some hand-forged knives.
I think for me, when it comes down to the end of the day, I'm not always buying the same knife because I have different reasons to buy a knife. And it depends on what I'm valuing at that time. Is it a gift for someone who is maybe their first knife and maybe they're not so gentle with things? Or is it a gift for someone who really deserves something beautiful and special? Maybe that gift is for me. Maybe it's because there's something that I've never had before in a knife. So there's a lot of different reasons, and it depends on what you want. And I think one of the things that's great at Knifewear is we've got such a great selection. Like, you've really curated such a great selection that there's pretty much an answer in there for everybody, for what you want and what's gonna be the best thing for you to use in your kitchen to make food, to feed your friends and family. Factory-made knives are really awesome these days. What do you think?
Like, I totally agree. And it doesn't have to look as simple as, say, Tojiro, right? We have Haruki knives that look stunning. Not only they look cool, but work so great as well.
There's the great job that we get to have is to try and line up the right person with the right knife. And we certainly have a great selection for everybody.
Yeah, we're like a Tinder for your knives. If you want to learn more about knives, check out this playlist.
Yeah, swipe right on the playlist. I don't know. DM me. Hit me up in the DMs. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about knives, hit up our playlist. If you need help with your Tinder account, Naoto's got you.
Primitive knives.
Sound like a magpie.